Difficult Realities is an Elite City Media podcast. If you're interested in more information, make sure you follow us on Twitter at DifficultPod. Subscribe to our official YouTube channel, and keep your eyes open wherever you listen to podcasts for more episodes. No matter what you're listening on, make sure you turn on notifications so you always know when a new episode is posted. And most importantly, remember that while this is an opinion-based podcast, it is also backed up by evidence and facts. Or in other words, this podcast is Difficult Realities. Welcome back. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I am Swerve and you are listening to Difficult Realities, a podcast on the state of the United States. Once again, as always, I am joined to my left by the wonderful Spittin'.
What's up, guys?
And to my right, I am joined by the massive Yeti.
How's everyone doing today?
I am so grateful that you actually changed your Twitter name to Massive Yeti. That fills me with warmth.
It's funny because I think I might actually be the smallest guy.
Really? I don't know about that. I thought you were pretty big.
Apparently I look a lot bigger than I actually am.
Is that right?
I'm like 6 foot according to the doctors.
Okay.
And everyone's like, "Aren't you like 6'3"? I was like, no,
that's just what it looks like. You're just short. Spittin', how tall are you then?
Oh, I'm just 6 foot.
Okay, so yeah, I guess I am the biggest one then because I'm 6'4". Not to brag or anything. But nonetheless, setting our heights aside, we're going to talk about two really big things, but more so in the context of how their destruction resulted in a surveillance state, because today's episode is all about how 9/11 allowed the U.S. government to continually create emergencies and allow a surveillance state to take root in the United States. And I want to start off once again with one of our little prefaces because it is very important. This episode is not going to deal with 9/11 conspiracy theories because largely what caused 9/11 is not relevant to the context of 9/11 happened and then there were consequences. Now, I'm not opposed to bringing up the theories and discussing them rhetorically for the point, but this is not an episode about the happenings of 9/11. This episode is about how the events of 9/11 allowed the government to create a surveillance state. And whether or not it was an inside job or whether or not it was terrorists or whether or not it was anything doesn't change the fact that they used the event to create a surveillance state. So I want to clarify that up ahead of time to sort of ward off any people who would be like, well, they're just going to lie and talk about George W. Bush doing it so that they can spin tales of America's downfall or whatever they might say, because it's not what we're here to do today. In fact, we have a lot of really good information on the Patriot Act, the way the Patriot Act formed and reformed and was reinstituted and recreated and reinstituted again, and how people like Edward Snowden exposed this surveillance state for a lot of people who didn't already know it was happening at the time that it was exposed. So, with that being said, again, today we're talking about surveillance, government surveillance, and I don't know. Well, let me say it like this. I question whether or not people really understand how capable the government is of watching you. A couple of years ago, they did a poll in the public asking people who Edward Snowden was, and an overwhelming majority of people could not identify him, misidentified him as either Julian Assange or some other whistleblower, or completely had disinformation as to who Edward Snowden was. Only a small majority of people got it correct. And there's a lot of people out there who, when we talk about government surveillance, hold the opinion that, well, let them look at me because I have nothing to hide. I have nothing to fear because I have nothing to hide. And I'm okay with that opinion if it's an informed opinion, but I'm not totally convinced that it is. Because the United States government really does have the ability to look at pretty much anything you do. They've attested for years that they don't read emails, they don't read text messages, they don't listen to phone calls. But we have whistleblowers with knowledge, and we have tech heads with knowledge who have deciphered some of these programs and some of these tasks and some of these responsibilities. And we know better that the truth is yes, phone calls are listened to, keywords on the internet are tracked, emails are definitely read. And a lot of these companies, like Google, like Gmail, like Facebook, they are private companies and sell these records to the government for a profit or turn them over via subpoena. So, and I mean, everybody knows about the myth, which is not really a myth, that your phone listens to you and tracks you everywhere you go. It has geometric syncing technology. It knows where you are. Everybody out here has a story of being at dinner and talking with somebody about some product and then getting an ad for that product on their phone, or talking about wanting to take a vacation, and next thing you know, they have ads for travel agencies and ads for boats and ads for plane tickets and hotels, because your phones do listen to you, and they guise it under the ruse of, well, we're just doing it to sell advertisements. We're just doing it to sell advertisements. To which you have to be either willfully ignorant or completely naive to actually believe that. And even to the point where we talked about on episode 3 with Apple, how their new pedophile spying technology is not going to remain pedophile spying technology for very long. Eventually, they'll use it to track everything else on people's clouds and on people's phones. So part of the reason I wanted to do this episode today is because I don't think people are really informed as to how much the government is capable of watching you, how much they do watch you, and the consequences of why watching you can result in trouble for everyone, especially considering that technology and the Fourth Amendment have not caught up to one another. Technology has outraced the Fourth Amendment, which is the right against illegal search and seizure, right?
Yep. And
our technology has grown so far, so quickly, and our legislators are so old and out of touch that some of them don't understand, and some of them do and play defense against us, that the internet and the computers and the technology that we have are not protected by the Fourth Amendment the way they should be. In the same way that the police shouldn't be able to just come into your house and look at your shit without warrants, why is the government able to look at your computer and your emails and your phone without those same warrants? So we're going to talk about all of that today, but I want to get to the origins of everything, of how this all really started, which was, of course, 9/11, September 11th, 2001, when the Twin Towers were destroyed by airplanes. Now, regardless of how you believe that happened, that event stirred America into a frenzy of, in my opinion, false patriotism. It led the political world to necessarily demand that everyone rally behind the president, that at the time, George W. Bush, that opposing the president was as good as an act of treason in a time like this. And it created a fervor where people were incessant that they needed to feel safe. So the U.S. government exploited that fear and created one of the most vulgar, intrusive spying bills ever introduced to the public, which is known as the Patriot Act. And Yeti, the Canadian amongst us, has done the deep digging on the Patriot Act, and I'm going to let him kick things off with what he found about that bill.
So the Patriot Act was started or signed on May 7th. Oh, wait, sorry. That wasn't. Oh, for fuck's sakes. I wrote that down wrong. Sorry. The Patriot Act is united and strengthening America by providing appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorism Act of 2001.
So it's an acronym.
Yeah, it was the acronym. And essentially what it does is just allow the government to start using private companies to do their snooping for them, essentially.
Now, were these contracted companies or private organizations?
Some of them were private organizations, some of them were the contractors. But originally the contractors, prior to 2001, they only had, the NSA had about 55 contractors, and they awarded a total of 144 contractors. In 2 years' time, it expanded to 7,197 contracts to 4,388 contractors.
So an exponential growth in government employees.
Yes, and so essentially when they sign the contracts, is you're now essentially doing the government bidding anyways. So regardless of how you feel about it, you're already under contract and they can push whatever they really want on the corporations.
Now, I will say the federal government does have some restrictions as to what they can ask contractors to do, and I'm going to give a little bit of a history of the time that I was a government contractor with what I'm allowed to talk about, anyways, because I was a federal contractor at one point in my life back in 2015 to 2019. So, but beyond that, yeah, you can see how, and that's just the NSA, correct?
Yes.
So, and you can imagine what the CIA did, what the DOD did. Those numbers are out there too. And if you want, I encourage you to go look at them, because we knew from the time that that act was passed and the time that 9/11 happened that the fervor around patriotism was going to bloom. It was going to become a situation where everything that George W. Bush did was untouchable, that criticism of him in any meaningful way was going to be viewed as dissent. And that is an element of a surveillance state, when you have to consciously consider that what you're saying will get you persecuted. And it doesn't have to just be legally. It can be culturally as well. It is true that a culture brainwashed will act the same as a police force when it comes to political dissent. I mean, that's what 1984 was all about. They had convinced the citizens in that book that their minor transgressions against the government were so bad that they themselves believed that they deserved whatever punishment they got, including if they were talking in their sleep and dissented in their sleep. So that's part. It's important to understand that when we talk about these things, it is not just the government that we're talking about. If we convinced every single person except for one dude on this planet that the United States government was just and absolute and could do no wrong, that one guy would feel persecuted anytime he said anything about anything.
Yep.
So that society plays that role too, and that's why I want this to be an informed discussion, because an uninformed society will parrot the surveillance state mantras and rhetoric and jargon because they think they're doing the right thing.
Yeah. Originally, companies did actually push back. Because if you look at the timeline of when the company signed up, it goes from like September 11th, shocking the visualization of that one. Microsoft signed on September 11th, 07, and then the last company was Apple that signed on in 2012. So there's a 5 years of gap of like companies pushing back, and basically I think what happened is slowly kind of getting pulled.
Yeah, they acquiesced over time.
Yeah.
But even that tells you that slow acquiescence, that slow growth into conformity tells you that it was always just a matter of time. These companies were always going to get on board. They were waiting for the right deal. Because you don't go and get Microsoft and Apple, the two leading software companies in the United States, to sign on to your Patriot Act and your spying without intent to use Microsoft-based software and Apple-based software for your program.
Yep.
I mean, almost every computer, almost every house in the world either has a Windows computer or an Apple phone or an Apple computer or a Windows phone, just to some extent. They all have them. You can't tell me that the possession of technology becoming so easy to do, people have so much technology, isn't partially fueled by a surveillance-based government. I mean, smartphones were probably one of the government's happiest achievements, because now they can geometrically position anybody they want and listen to any conversation they want.
Yep.
I mean, it's just like, It's too easy for them at that point.
Well, it's not. It's not even like they hide it either. Like
No, they really don't.
It's in the open, and people are like, "Oh, they're not going to do that." It's like, when has the government ever actually worked in our favor so far?
And that's kind
Never.
of and that's kind of the thing too, is that this weird assumption that exists that the government would never do that when we have documented evidence of them doing that.
Yeah.
We have multiple, but the loudest and most obvious is obviously Edward Snowden. And I know, Spittin', you went and got a whole bunch of information on Edward Snowden for us, and I have information on Edward Snowden, and I'm going to compare our relative experiences for the sake of affirming a lot of what he talks about. So, Spittin', what do you have for us on Edward Snowden?
Well, I don't really. I watched the movie and I've listened to the podcast
Yeah.
with Rogan and
Yeah.
and like I don't have I'm not going to go into a great history about
Right.
most people that are going to be listening to our podcast are going to know a pretty good deal about the impact that he had. But like some stuff that people might not know, because the media still tries to push the narrative that he's a traitor because of what he did. And Ben Rhodes has just come out a couple days ago and confirmed a story that when Snowden was on Brian Williams, he a couple of years ago when he was pushing his book, he was asked, like, well, why'd you choose Russia to go to? If you're not giving trade secrets to Russia, then why would you pick Russia to go to? Well, he didn't, and he was in Hong Kong when he handed over the information to Glenn Greenwald of the NSA leak, and he was immediately taken to a safe house after that in Hong Kong, and they had to get him out, and they were going to he was supposed to go to Ecuador or Bolivia, somewhere like that, to seek asylum. And whenever his layover flight landed in Moscow, Joe Biden and John Kerry let every country know that there would be a price to pay if they granted asylum to Edward Snowden.
Right.
I think it's come out that he's applied for asylum in 27 different countries, including Germany, France, and amongst others. And
I believe he's in Russia now.
Well, I mean, yeah, he's in Russia, and that's what I'm saying. Whenever his layover flight landed in Moscow, that is when they canceled his passport.
Right.
The United States, and like I said, Biden and John Kerry were, what was John Kerry at the time? Secretary of State. Biden was vice president, and they let all these countries know that if you do business with Edward Snowden, if you try and grant him asylum, there would be hell to pay.
And Lord knows what that even means. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. And they even acknowledged to these countries that we understand that protecting whistleblowers and something would be in your best interest, but we're telling you that it would be in your worst interest to do it. And whenever he said that on Brian Williams, everybody just figured it was Russian traitor talk, So they're saying, just trying to throw more dirt on America. And he let it be known in that interview that he wanted to come back to America, and he wasn't expecting a parade. He wasn't expecting a pardon. All he's ever wanted was a fair trial, and they, they won't
Yeah.
they won't agree to it.
Right.
So
Everybody
that
knows
was
the
a couple
second that he,
years ago.
yeah, everybody knows the second that he would walk back into the United States, he would disappear into some sort of black bag, and then we'd find on the news that he killed himself in his jail cell.
Of course,
Overwhelming guilt letter.
and
the old
that's
2 bullets to the head. Suicide.
Yeah.
and that's also why when the Guardian published the story, he wanted it all to be video documented, and he made it clear to the reporters at the time that he didn't want fame out of this. He didn't want money. He was
Yeah.
just doing what was right. But the reason why he wanted it to be on video and have his name out there is because if he didn't, it would be easier for him to disappear.
And for the government to dismiss the accusations.
Yes, and by him to disappear, I mean by the government making him disappear.
Yeah, of course.
And yeah, so Ben Rhodes came out, just I want to say a couple days ago, and confirmed that this was all true.
Right.
that Biden and Kerry both did cancel his passport and made it to where he was stuck in Russia.
Right.
So and there's articles about it too. I can link it. So
yeah. And I've always found one of the more interesting things too over the last couple election cycles, specifically 2016 and 2020, was there was still a lot of discussion about Edward Snowden and about whether or not he should be pardoned or executed. Like what are the two extremes here? And I found it amusing that all of the serious candidates, with the exception of maybe Bernie Sanders, said that, look, we're not going to talk about pardons, and the protection of information is paramount to the security of the United States, and we would have to have a lengthy trial for Mr. Snowden's decision to act against the interest of the United States. Is almost like verbatim how they would all answer that question. The only two people I can think that didn't answer that way were Lincoln Chafee and Bernie Sanders, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it goes to show you, and that's Republicans and Democrats included together, which is important to note because we talk all the time about how both parties are really just one big party, and you can never see better examples of that than when someone threatens the military, or when somebody threatens military security or government information technology or something to that effect. They'll drop any fucking petty disagreement to be like, find that guy, kill that guy immediately.
Oh, yeah, they'll suddenly all vote along the lines.
Yeah.
Well, and like when Julian Assange released all that shit showing that George Bush was a war criminal,
yeah,
the Democrats loved him.
Yeah.
And then when he released documents showing Obama was a war criminal,
now he's evil.
The motherfucker needs to be tried on the Espionage Act.
Yeah, it's it's exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Go ahead though.
No. I'm okay. Done with that.
So we're gonna get more into Snowden in a minute, but I want to do a little bit more on this Patriot Act. I want to talk about its impact, and I actually have a plan to tie it back way farther than you think. Some of these steps might have been put into place. So, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Before you delve that far into it, can I just bring up that the Patriot Act was, what did you have the date, Yeti, when it was signed into law?
I think it was May 7th, 2001.
Okay.
I just wrote 2015 for some reason.
It would have been 2002 then.
Yes.
Okay. So and what was it? It was like a 131 page document.
I didn't get the specifics on how long it was.
Okay. Well, it was something around there. And
yeah, it's quite long.
And it was nothing, like you could have put anything in that thing. And as long as they called it the Patriot Act and not the Spying on Americans Act, it was going to get passed because, like
Yeah.
you said, there was this hyper patriotism that if you didn't if you didn't agree with what was going on, then holy shit, send you to Gitmo.
Yeah.
But like,
It
okay, so
actually allows for the indefinite detention of immigrants as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna get into a bit of that in just a minute.
okay,
Okay.
so but like there was little things before the Patriot Act got passed that kind of get swept under the rug, I guess, or not talked about as much. But on the night of 9/11, there was already uh, something set in place called total information awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And this John Poindexter, who used to be Reagan's national security advisor, but was also found guilty of 5 crimes of trying to cover up the Iran Contra scandal. Um, he he had an ear. He had President Bush's ear at the time, and he I'm not sure exactly where he was working at the time, but it was I it was some kind of defense contractor, and he had this total information awareness thing where it was like what these people had a hard on for since the internet became a thing. Like, how are we going to police this? Like we can't have these people all fucking coming up with their own ideas and searching shit,
Yes.
without any kind of recourse. So it was this idea of gathering up the digital data of all Americans,
Yes.
and uh, he said something to the effect of we must put the introduction of new technology on a wartime basis, which I mean, to me, that sounds like with the ever evolving technology, like you were saying, we must always consider it like uh, an act of war,
Right.
or we must always be on our toes that that's possible. And what this Poindexter guy didn't know, even though he was rewarded with a $200 million budget for this thing, like
Right.
3 days after 9/11,
Right.
uh, which $200 million, well, no big deal. But
Yeah.
but he
For
didn't
that,
know,
yeah.
Pocket
but
change.
he didn't know that uh, the the White House had already devised a plan with the NSA to increase the NSA's budget from like 20 billion to 100 billion in that same amount of time. And the NSA already had their own program that they were calling what was it called? Stellar Wind,
Yeah.
right? And it was also known as the President Surveillance Program, but that doesn't sell as well. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And it was the warrantless surveillance system.
Mm-hmm.
So it just sought to identify terrorist links by analyzing the metadata drawn from emails, telephone calls, and internet activity of
Yes.
every American.
Yes.
So that was like past uh, early October of 2001. So the September 11th wasn't even a month gone yet, and we've already had 200 million thrown to total information awareness,
Mm-hmm.
and then we also had the 100 billion, the 80 billion extra given to the NSA for their Stellar Wind program, and the uh, the total information awareness, it was disbanded in like 2004 because of the
2003,
huge
actually.
2003. Okay,
Yes.
because of
May of
the
2000. Or no, it was renamed from the total information awareness in May of 2003 to the terrorism information awareness, and then Congress defunded it in late 2003 after mass criticism.
after mass criticism because of huge government overreach.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because we were
Because it
figuring
was-
out that it wasn't just terrorism.
Yeah,
that-
it was
that we were
quote
going
unquote
on.
total information awareness over all citizens.
But here's the thing. In 2012, now you can check me on this too. It was either 2012 or 2013, whenever the NSA opened up their huge fucking compound in Utah. And that right there, that's the brainchild of this John Poindexter. Like, he
Yeah.
might not have had a complete hand in doing it through the NSA, but that whole compound with all the supercomputers and all the keyword technology and all that shit that they're doing there, that was like something that he had a hard on for before 9/11. Like, he couldn't have imagined like that. But when he saw what the internet was capable of and how people were using it to inform themselves, that's immediately when he got the hard on for wanting to police it the way that they have done.
Mm-hmm. And I want to add as well, you talked about 2012. This is still relevant. Technically speaking, the program was defunded by Congress in 2003. However, the core architecture of total information awareness was developed by the NSA under the code name Project Basketball. And there are people, including Snowden, who will tell you that this program is still very much alive and well and quietly thriving at the NSA to this day. Now,
Yeah.
I would like to add a little bit of specifics here with this program, because while you were talking about it, I went and looked some stuff up for myself. I want to add some specifics here because I think there's some fascinating little tidbits of knowledge as to how far they were actually willing to go to spy on people. And some of this is astounding. There's part of the program was called Genesis, and it's not that shitty Terminator sequel. This is actually where I think they got their name for that movie from, because it's spelled the same way, Genisys. But this was
equally as shitty.
Yeah. This was considered to be ultra large, all-encompassing source of information repositories, like you said, to include not cell phones, but phones, internet databases, World Wide Web, and up to, but not limited to, genetic information, including fingerprints, blood type, and DNA sequence coding.
Which we all do on our own now through this
really
23andMe and all that shit.
Look, you guys want to talk about conspiracy theories? I'm going to deviate for a minute. I'm going to talk about a conspiracy theory. So this is new.
The fact that I'm 1/8 African?
No, that's not a conspiracy theory. That's just true. Now, I have long believed, with little to no evidence, but common sense and intellectual ability to reason, that those programs, 23andMe and what's the Ancestry? Yeah, I think those are FBI fronts. I think the FBI funds those, because you think about it. How often are you going to use that? One time?
Use it once and then get all the data, and that's it.
No, there's only so many people in the world, and I would say maybe about 40% of them, at a high estimate, would actually be willing to submit their shit for that. So what's the business model?
I think Google owns it now.
I mean, it might, but what's the business model? Like, how does that? You know what I'm saying? One use, even if you charge $200, that's not really sustainable.
Oh no, you can get like an app and stuff too to go with it. The 23andMe, and it'll update you if people like from your genus get added on. Stuff like that.
But what Swerve's saying is, like, once you prick your finger or swab your mouth or whatever and get this information back, then all of a sudden now you have this family tree that you've spent $50 for or whatever, and now you can share all this stuff with your family, and like where's the
sustained continuing business?
Exactly. Like, how do you talk your first cousin into doing it? How do you talk your sister into doing it whenever you've been given
everything for your
You all
family.
share the same DNA.
Yeah. And I mean, you think about it too. Once you're done, it's not like it's a subscription service where once a month they give you new information about your family. They'll give it all to you up front. So where's the sustained business? It has got to be the pizza mafia front for the FBI's genetic data collection. Because let's not pretend like the FBI is not collecting DNA and social engineering, or not social engineering, but genetic engineering information regarding creating databases on people.
Look,
Why do you think they want
Lord.
to photograph classrooms full of kids when they're too young to say no? Under the guise of protection.
When I got locked up, I had to send my DNA off, or
Yeah.
I had to register, and so what the government has done is found a catchy little way to get law-abiding citizens, people that ain't never done nothing in their life, to get in the same computer system.
Oh, you mean the ones who say things like, I have nothing to hide, so I have nothing to fear?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Shocking. So, I mean...
Now, look.
Yeah, go ahead.
Anything to hide. Government's already got all my genetics anyways.
They even have one of your old hearts.
Yeah, exactly. Even bastards.
But okay, so back to the whole before the Patriot Act and
Yes.
everything, right? Okay, now everyone was complicit in this, from all the way from the top to the bottom,
Yeah.
So from the very top, the president, to the middle, the FISA courts, to near the bottom, the media, to all the way to the bottom, us.
Regular people.
Policing, just like if you didn't have a fucking American flag on your front door,
right?
Then this guy might be
aiding and abetting.
He might be starting a sleeper cell out of his house.
And I'll tell you, to confirm your point, it went so far as to, I was in 4th grade when 9/11 actually happened. And for the next 3 or 4 years, 5th, 6th, 7th grade, you keep in mind how young that is, 10, 11, 12, right? Not very old. Kids, children at that age were mocking. If you said anything about you didn't like Bush or whatever, kids would come up, what are you, terrorist? What are you, spying on us? Children.
Yeah, so then that kid would go home and tell his ultra patriotic parents that there was a kid today that was saying that Bush was responsible for 9/11. And then all of a sudden, well, he had to have heard that from his parents. So now all of a sudden, those parents are at odds with the other kid's parents.
Yeah.
But like in 2004, the New York Times published an article about the government overreach with the warrantless surveillance and all that. So everybody was like, kudos to New York Times for breaking this story, right? Back in 2004, or 2000 was published. They got it in 2004 and sat on it for an entire fucking year, knowing the magnitude of what they were doing, the government, and that was at the request of the White House.
Right.
So somebody broke that story to them, and then like the New York Times called the White House to confirm it, and the White House is like, yeah, sorta, kinda, but we're gonna appreciate it if you don't let the cat out of the bag just yet because of terrorism. And then the LA Times did the same thing back in 2004. So what, 9 years before Snowden, this guy Mark Klein, I think his name was.
Yeah.
Mark Klein. He revealed to the LA Times that because he was working for AT&T in San Francisco, I think it was.
Right.
And he revealed to the LA Times that AT&T had just handed over their internet traffic to the NSA. they were copying and collecting the info and just giving them every bit. They had their own. The NSA had their own room at this AT&T headquarters,
Right.
and this Klein guy saw what they were up to, and he was like, it just made me sick to my stomach to think that uh, they were getting away with all this shit, right?
Right.
Same thing happened. He went to them. They they took his information and gave it to the government and let them spend like however many months doing hit pieces on him, you know, or not hit pieces, but background shit to where they were ready to smear him once the
Hmm.
story came out. So they they were all working hand in hand, you know, the media and the government, and that is all still true today, way more than it was back then.
Right. Now, just a little bit more on this TIA program, because there's three other things here in this that I think are particularly standout-ish, if you will. First one is called Project Genoa, which was a main. It should really be a main article on its own, but it actually predated TIA and actually was the foundation for it. And Genoa's idea was that a policymaker, and that's important, not a government agent or a federal watchdog or something like that, a policymaker, so like a member of Congress, could hypothesize an attack and use the information in Genoa, which is a compilation of supporting evidence, previous experience, and all of this other intelligence, to diagram and suggest possible outcomes. And the human analyst could then modify the diagram to fit the case as needed. It was originally commissioned in 96 and completed in 2002. And the concept was that they would be able to predict or attempt to predict various attacks and then counter strategize to them ahead of time. The problem was that a lot of the times that they used this program, they sort of hypothesized ridiculous over the top possibilities, like terrorists recruiting people, like recruiting disenfranchised minorities in Montana to create sleeper cells, as opposed to real practical things like hijackings and local bombings.
Yeah, didn't they arrest like more drug dealers with this thing than anything?
I believe that's accurate, but I don't want to confirm for sure without that direct information on hand.
Yeah, I'll have to look that up.
Now, the next thing here is called Scalable Social Network Analysis. Now, keep in mind, this isn't social networking like Twitter and Facebook, because we're talking about 2001 and 2002 in the 90s here, right? So it's not that kind of social network. What this was a tool aimed to develop techniques based on the way networks of people socialize and model the characteristics of groups to discriminate them from other societal groups. Now, the claimed intended purpose was they would use this to look at how terrorists behave as opposed to regular people and identify them based on their erratic and strange behavior. But we all know that this thing was used to target minority groups and political dissenters and anti-war protesters and discern how they behave as opposed to regular people. Because we saw an increase in jailing of those types of people after 9/11. Specifically, minority imprisonment went way up, and for-profit prison was partially responsible for that, and we're going to talk about that issue at length in a few episodes. But let's also not pretend that these government time policies and programs weren't used to put away politically inconvenient people as well.
Of course.
And the last thing I want to talk about, because it's amazing that they even tried this, it was actually called biosurveillance. And it was the idea that they could monitor non-traditional data sources like animal sentinels, which is like, an animal that you would put a tracker on or in to keep eyes on the herd or the pack or whatever the case might be.
Their migratory paths.
Yeah, exactly. And disease models to identify abnormal health indicators implying some kind of biological attack or bioterrorism. Now, obviously, we know today, especially right now, that doesn't work for shit. because look at the state that we're in right now. We've done 2 episodes on the goddamn pandemic. I just find it amazing that they tried all of this ridiculous shit and that they were working on things like facial recognition and genetic determination as early as the 90s, before that technology even really had a chance. But they were trying. They were ready to go.
As soon as they realized what they had, they were going full gung-ho on it.
I think you're absolutely right. And the TIA, the program that Spittin was talking about, is one of the precursors to the Patriot Act, and a lot of that technology and the stylistic approach got co-opted into the Patriot Act. And as we know, the language of the Patriot Act was all about stopping terrorism, identifying foreign aids that allowed terrorism to thrive, using the financial system to stop terroristic corruption, prosecuting terrorists. It opened the door for things like waterboarding and torture as a means of extracting information.
Well, even in the Patriot Act, they had it was the Boundless Informant Program that was hidden from Congress.
Yes,
completely too.
Now,
yeah, and only because they wanted it hidden from them.
Yeah, because they didn't want, they wanted that passing without a discussion.
Yeah,
because even
know about this, please.
Even in a post 9/11 hyper patriotic world, most people would see torture and go, "I don't know about that one. That's a little much." But after the fact, they got it through and they were able to do it, and then claim they got all this good information. And then it came out, oh, we really didn't get anything good. And, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed lied about a lot of the things that he gave the government. So, whoops, that didn't really do much of anything.
Yeah,
well, people will say anything when they're tortured.
Exactly. Yeah.
You hook somebody's nipples up to a battery cable and a car battery, and
okay, Shane McMahon.
Or like waterboard somebody, and their line of questioning is the same kind of techniques they use to get confessions.
The police
and the FBI and police. The same technique. It's called leading.
Yes.
You know what I mean? That's why you always want a lawyer present whenever you're talking to.
They'll give you tidbits of stories too at times.
I encourage
that you'll fit them in.
Or they'll provide false evidence as well. They'll say like, "Oh, this is a hair we found on the victim's body, and we've identified it to be yours. What do you want to tell us now?" Or something to that effect. And if you guys don't think, if you're out there and you're listening and you either don't think it's true or have never really looked into the amount of false confessions that people give to the police, you should really look it up, because it's not even always just you confess out of duress. Sometimes people will falsely plead guilty because their lawyers will say, look, the case they got against you, even if you're innocent, if you take it to trial, you're looking at 25 to life. If you plead out, you're looking at 6 years, and then you'll get to go home. So a lot of people will take the deal.
Look at the Central Park 7.
Yeah.
Central Park 5.
Yeah.
I mean, they were just kids, man. And like, they were still holding strong. Like, I didn't do what you're saying. And it's like, look, we know where your dad works, and we know how much debt he has. And we're gonna make him lose his job. And your family's gonna starve to death.
And it'll be your fault.
Yeah, and so that's how they coerced confessions out of those kids, man.
And they do the same thing. They did the same thing to a lot of these guys in Guantanamo Bay. They would come up to them and say, look, I know you didn't get this far in your life without an exit strategy. Tell me what that exit strategy is. Is it money? Is it moving to a country where the Taliban or Al-Qaeda can't reach you? Is it, reallocating to America? Look, you give me the information I need, I'll make that happen. And then they give you the information and you end up being shot behind the shed by a firing squad 20 minutes later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's astounding to me that...
Well, we all remember those pictures that came out of Guantanamo Bay.
Oh, yeah.
Iraq and
the famous one of the dude basically crucified with electrical wire with that black bag over his head.
Yeah, and on top of a box.
Yeah,
a human pyramid.
Yeah, or the woman who was providing the inmates' lunches via enema. And there's a picture of the dude bent over with her giving the thumbs up.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
There's a couple other ones that are really bad too.
And I want to point out, because this is a humongous aspect of the Patriot Act, that a lot of the people who were in Guantanamo Bay were not formally charged, were not formally detained, were not offered jurisprudence, and were not convicted of a crime.
And are still there.
And they're still there. A lot of them are still there.
Some of them aren't even registered as people. Like there's just no
record of them.
Anyways,
so
they were just having a trial for one of them last week.
Yeah, and so this is the thing. One of the main reasons why the Patriot Act was so vulgar was it aided tremendously in the disruption, dismissal, and in some cases the dissolvance of jurisprudence, because they were allowed to detain anybody for an indiscriminate amount of time that they suspected to be involved with terrorism. And that broad definition, terrorism, can mean anything. It can mean that you were planning on sending money to Al-Qaeda or leaving the country to join them, or that you were a sleeper agent working on the inside, or that you were just some dude who was fed up with government and, like we saw a few weeks ago, was going to go park a truck full of bombs in front of the Capitol building. That's all under that scope, and they can detain anyone for pretty much anything if you are classified as, well, what you were doing falls into the scope of terrorism.
Yeah,
and
there was an FBI agent.
Yeah. Go ahead.
There was an FBI agent, Mike German, that actually spoke out against this when it came out too, because he said like this is just going to lead. He said it basically became the Wild West within the FBI.
Yeah. I've heard that quote.
No laws.
And,
well,
go ahead.
And also, there are so many horror stories from FBI agents that or informants that were had some type of criminal history, whether it be drug addiction or just parking tickets or whatever. They would be coerced into turn. Muslim people would be coerced to turn informant in order to get into a mosque or get accepted into a Muslim community that they thought had terrorist ties to it, and then once those people would get in and find out that there was nothing there, then they would be coached by bomb makers, like how to make bombs, and they would be coached into. They were the ones that would radicalize the people that they were sent to supposedly rat out their radicalism.
Right.
Yeah.
Like
it's like the reverse psychology kind of theory almost.
And it's entrapment.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, it's straight up.
Now, I want to point out as well that technically speaking, they were not to detain they were only to detain non-citizens. They were not to detain American citizens, but all that they technically had to do was identify them. The language is enemy combatant. If you were suspected of being an enemy combatant, even without proof, you could be indefinitely detained. And the U.S. government acknowledged that they had held at least 99 legal citizens as enemy combatants after their capture. So, I mean, 99 people doesn't sound like a lot until you think about the size of most prisons, 400 population, right? Not the super big ones, like the small town prisons. That's like a graduating class. That's like holding an entire graduating class in a small town in prison for no crime, no evidence, and no determinate amount of time.
Yeah. Well, everything is a long-term game. Like, that's why we get fooled so much, is we as humans always try to see what's happening right now. But if you're playing the long game, you're doing things so incrementally changing that you just accept it as you go. And that's where we've kind of ended up now, I think.
And now the next point, because we're pretty much done here with the Patriot Act in terms of what it was and what it did, and especially with the TIA information, considering most of that became the Patriot Act. one of the things I want to talk about in regards to why all of this, a lot of people at this point are going to be asking, well, how is this a surveillance state? Well, who cares if they're arresting prisoners and breaking up meetings and stuff? Because that directly results in the ability to police desertion and dissent. Because one of the biggest criticisms of the Patriot Act was that a lot of the search warrants that came through the Patriot Act came with a gag order, meaning that nobody who was part of it was allowed to talk about it. They cannot discuss it publicly without threat of reprisal. So in 2017, law enforcement obtained a bunch of warrants for protest groups. Protest groups. Protesting is not illegal. And those warrants included information taken from Facebook and other internet traffic, which again, what evidence did you have of a crime? And they infiltrated these meetings, broke them up, and in some cases arrested leaders or members for non-determinate crimes. Now, I talked in episode 2 about John Ehrlichman talking about how Nixon used the war on drugs to do the same thing to minority groups and anti-war protesters. If your opinion becomes some form of dissent and dissent becomes illegal, every word you say will be watched. Every word you say, you will have to watch. That is the definition of a surveillance state, even if you're the one doing your own surveillance. Now, there's one last thing about the Patriot Act that I want to talk about here, because it shows how many different interesting routes and avenues the government will go down to create your conformity and manufacture your consent. So a lot of people don't know this, but there are revisions in the Patriot Act about gun policing. Did you know that? Either of you guys?
No.
No, I didn't.
So the first time the Patriot Act had to be reintroduced and re-legislated was in 2006, and it largely went without much formal change. But one of the notable places that the Patriot Act was revised was actually in how the Patriot Act legislated government branch officials be appointed to leadership roles. And you're saying, what the hell does that mean? So you guys know, maybe Yeti doesn't, but I'm sure you know what the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms is, the ATF.
Oh, I know the ATF.
Okay, I didn't know because I don't know what your equivalent is in Canada. So
I don't know what the equivalent in Canada is, but I know what the ATF in the States is.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough.
I spent a long time reading about American stuff too, so.
Fair enough, fair enough. So the ATF is the federal policing agency for alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. It is their responsibility to police the sale of illegal alcohol or tobacco or firearms, as is implied by their name. For about, I don't know if they have a formal sitting president right now, but for a number of years, they did not have a sitting president because the Senate would not appoint a person to that role. And you're thinking to yourself, wait a minute, why does the Senate need to appoint the leader of the ATF? Because in that 2006 revision, Republican Representative James Sensenbrenner of Wisconsin snuck a revision into the Patriot Act that mandated that the president of the ATF position become a Senate appointee requirement. And the person who was acting as the president of the ATF was the governor of Minnesota. So that meant the person who was in charge of the agency that polices alcohol and tobacco and firearms had another full-time job. That same year, James Sensenbrenner won an award from the National Rifle Association called the Defender of Freedom Award. Shocking coincidence, that one. Now, additionally, in the late 2000s and the early 2010s, another senator named Todd Tiahrt snuck a bunch of revisions into other unrelated spending bills that prevented the ATF from creating federal registries or policing used gun inventories or even policing dealership inventories for gun shops. And in reality, because the ATF had 2,500 agents for almost 40 years, they were really only able to inspect a lot of those gun dealerships once every 17-ish years, which is like, you might as well not even do it. because
Yeah.
what are you going to find in 17 years after one audit? They also made it so that background
investigation. 16 years of lies is what you're
They
gonna
also
find.
made it so that background investigation information on gun transactions had to be destroyed within 24 hours. Now, all of you out there at this point are saying, what does this have to do with surveillance? It's simple. When you cannot arm yourself and defend yourself, you have no means of protection against overreach. You can't stop a government from coming in and silencing you if you can't arm yourself. And this goes back a lot further than that, too. This goes all the way back to Nixon and Reagan. Because you guys might remember a little group called the Black Panthers, correct?
I do.
Well, it's funny because the NRA, for a long time, was really a very pro-responsible gun agency. Get your guns, teach people how to shoot, use them properly, don't be vigilantes. And all of a sudden, a major political movement in the black community armed itself. And all of a sudden, then California Governor Richard Nixon went in and changed all the laws in that state about who was allowed to own guns and where you were allowed to carry. And they made it illegal to carry in public without registration. Guess who they then would not allow to register and identified as a domestic terrorist group?
Black Panthers.
Oh, shocking. So that nice little word there, terrorism, can be applied to anything that they don't want to be a solid, statutable agency or organization. And James Sensenbrenner then had the arrogance to go on the House floor in 2011 talking about the revision of the Patriot Act and tell the people that the Republicans knew they were making people safer. And I'm going to play that clip for you right now. And again, this is that same guy, James Sensenbrenner, talking about the revision of the Patriot Act, a bill that he snuck in revisions that made it harder for people to oppose the Patriot Act.
Been a lot said about national security letters. The authority for them was made permanent in 2006 and is not a part of this bill. So we ought to completely forget about the complaints about national security letters. What I will say is that in the 2006 reauthorization of the Patriot Act, there were provisions in to give recipients of a national security letter the right to obtain judicial review. And I'm proud of that fact because I think whatever constitutional infirmities there were in this part of the Patriot Act were solved. Now, we hear an awful lot about no oversight. The people on the other side of the aisle who are complaining about this had the authority to have oversight hearings. There was only one of them in the last Congress, and you compare that to the 9 subcommittee hearings, 3 full committee hearings, and a full markup that we had in 2006 when this side of the aisle had the majority. The people who have been doing the oversight have been the Republicans, not the Democrats. The people who know this law is making Americans safer are the Republicans, and the Democrats, once again, are complaining. I yield back.
So, before everybody out there, all the conservatives who may or may not be listening, start short stroking themselves over, well, yeah, the Democrats didn't do shit to police this bill. The Democrats hate the Patriot Act. And before all the Democrats out there start going, yeah, you're right, we do hate the Patriot Act because it allowed for all this shit that Democrats would never let get pushed through. Who was president in 2014, guys?
I believe that was Obama.
Yes, that was Barack Obama. Which party did Barack Obama belong to?
The Democrats.
So when the Patriot Act got renewed in 2014, my God, whose responsibility would that have been?
Mr. Barack Obama.
So, once again, I want to return to my original point of when it comes to opposing war or opposing government information, it's one big club and you aren't in it, as the late George Carlin once said. So that's all I got on. That's all I got on the Patriot Act, and there's a ton more information out there. And if you want to read it, I encourage you to look it up because It was truly one of the defining moments of the last 20 some years of American politics. And just for one bit of clarity, I have here that the Patriot Act was actually passed in October 24th of 2001.
So a month and a half after September 11th.
Yes. So
And how big was that bill?
quite big.
131 pages, I think. But I mean, you know,
And the
that's
final
nothing.
the final vote on this, by the way, in the House was 357 for, 66 against. And in the Senate the next day, it was 98-1.
Not one of those fuckers ever read that bill either.
I guarantee it. I guarantee if they did, they only read the parts that they needed to talk about on
Well, there was no,
TV.
like
Oh,
I
the
said,
title?
there was,
Go
like
ahead,
I said, there was no sense in it
No.
because they could have put anything they wanted in it.
So-
And I mean, it was getting passed.
Yeah, I mean, it was just absolutely stark how they just snuck that right through America's noses. And like we said, look at all the stuff that came with it. Torture, jurisprudence suspension, illegal detention, spying on a mass scale. And now we go back to sort of Edward Snowden because he was one of the people that exposed some of the more modern programs that the government uses to spy on people. And Yeti, I know you have information on PRISM.
Yep.
So why don't you go ahead and tell us about what PRISM is?
Gotta go back a bit.
Oh, I put him on the spot. I didn't let him go through his notes. Well, long short, while Yeti's looking through his notes, one of the main things about PRISM is it was just one of many programs that the NSA instituted to spy on people. And just like
Okay.
TIA, just like the Patriot Act, it's a continuation of all of these technologies. And a lot of these, as you'll come to find, the more you look into this, are very much linked together. So, Yeti, you have your notes ready?
So the Prism companies, as they started, I just want to go over the dates in which they started.
Sure.
So Microsoft started on September 11th, 07, like I said earlier. Yahoo, March 12th, 08. Google, January 14th, 09. Facebook, June 3rd, 09. Pal Talk, I don't even know what that is, honestly. December 7th, 09. YouTube, September 24th.
YouTube?
Yeah, September 24th, 2010. Skype, February 6th, 2011. AOL, March 31st. And then Apple, October 2012. And all the program does is essentially allows the government to access the data that the companies use for marketing, essentially.
Right.
On top of it also accesses any emails and stuff like that.
So remember earlier when I said you would have to be either willfully ignorant or completely naive to believe that all that data collection about advertisement is only used for that purpose?
Yeah, it's that metadata you were talking about. And it costs $20 million a year for this program.
Now, here's the interesting question I have, and you may not have an answer to this, and this might be a sort of almost rhetorical because there might not be a definitive number, but I want to know how many attempts at terror or attempts at espionage or treason were actually stopped as a result of this program and its sister programs.
Oh,
What's that, Spittin'?
I know.
Oh, do you?
Perfect.
Yeah, one.
Oh, yeah? What was the story?
Shit. Once again, you cut me.
Well, if you can look it up. You can look it up while I prose this next point to Yeti then. So Yeti, when did you say this program started?
This was the one that started in early 2000.
All right, so we'll just
early 2002, late
2000
2001.
All right, so we'll just say 2002 for the sake of easy math, okay?
Yeah.
So,
Okay, you ready? Sorry.
yeah, let me just make this point and then we'll get into it. Yeah. So it's currently 2021. So let's assume the program is still running because it is. Okay. So 19 years. You said it costs what, 20 million a year?
Yep.
So do the math on how much that is
380 million.
to catch one person. $380 million to catch one person and otherwise completely interrupt and interfere with the lives of everybody else. But I digress.
It wasn't even like a big act of terrorism, was it?
Let's find
That they
out. Let's
stopped?
Spit and found it, so let's find out.
Okay. Despite the NSA's claim that by snooping on all Americans' communications, it had thwarted numerous other 9/11s, the agency could only point to one terrorism case, that of Basile Molin.
Real quick,
Found
are you
guilty-
reading from a source?
Yeah, The Guardian.
The Guardian. Okay, so this is a direct Guardian article. We'll make sure to include that in the description down below.
Yeah, because I just took a screenshot of this and
Right.
had it on my phone. So
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
that of Basile Maulin,
Okay.
found guilty of funding Somali extremism that had come through the phone records program. But last year, a federal judge concluded that even Maulin's case had been irrelevant. The NSA played no role in his conviction.
Shocking.
So not even one. And I think I said before on another podcast, I'm not as good at remembering the numbers as you are.
Right.
But only that if you look at those imprisoned in the U.S., that let's just say, now I'm going to be wrong on this, but let's just say that 78% of everybody imprisoned is because of drug-related crimes.
Right.
Okay.
Just a number.
Yeah, let's just say 4% is for murder. Okay.
Right.
National security interests,
Mhm.
0.0%. It is a number so small that like there's like 20 or so people locked up in the whole prison population
I
for.
think they're all at the
National
Colorado Max, aren't they?
Oh, that I don't know. I just know that I just know that it is such a low number that it equivals 0.0% of the prison population.
Jeez. And they
so-
could even
so
stop
all
the
all this
Boston
spying-
bombing.
Oh, and that's the thing. That was the thing with the TIA. Like they were swooping in to make, kind of, the NSA had never really done shit. Like they couldn't stop the USS Cole. They couldn't stop the first time the Trade Center was getting bombed. They sure as fuck couldn't stop 9/11. Like what?
Were they before
What did
Oklahoma?
NSA? Way
Yeah.
before.
Oh, yeah,
NSA
so
was
they
implemented
thought that shit
under NSA was implemented under Nixon, I think.
I believe that's right. Yeah.
Oh, right,
So-
right. Sorry, I probably should have.
So
done
they had never really been able to stop anything from happening, and somehow it took them. It took the towers coming down for Congress to be like, "Oh, we've been throwing $20 billion a year away by funding the NSA. Here's $100 billion.
that.
You guys are shit at your job. You're the absolute worst."
Enjoy
And
this
somehow-
raise.
Yeah, and somehow somebody convinced them, well, it's because you only give us $20 billion. So therein, like when we started the podcast, Yeti with his numbers on the contractors, the before and after.
Right.
Oh, it's like before 9/11, we only got 55 contractors. What are we supposed to do? Well, here's 7,000 of them.
Yeah.
And with all that, they were only able to come up in 20 years or 18 years, however long it was, the Patriot Act was a law. They were only able to have this one instance that they hung their hat on, this Mao Lin guy, like, well, but we stopped Mao Lin.
And
then
even then, they shouldn't have hung their hat on it.
And then a federal judge says, no, that had nothing to do with you guys.
Yep.
And it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
oh, so now, as of today, the NSA's funding is $80 billion.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like we're taking $20 billion away from you. You've done bad.
I swear they just
Here's
make
80
up
billion more.
numbers and just see how high they can make them before people start calling them out. Fuck it,
I mean,
we lost 3 trillion.
it's not entirely impossible.
No one's gonna do anything. You're just gonna sit there. All right then.
Well, it's like Rumsfeld the day before 9/11. You know, saying that
Yeah.
the Pentagon misplaced $2.5 trillion. And,
How do you
Yeah.
just misplace that?
and where the plane landed on the Pentagon was the file room or whatever where that shit was being stored.
Yeah, I don't
Like-
think there was anyone in that part of the building either.
No. Like, so it's like the day before this shit happens, Rumsfeld's like, yeah, I got some bad news, guys. You know, we seem to have lost like $2.5 trillion. And it's like, you mean billion? Oh, no, trillion.
No, the trillion part was right.
Like,
As
what
if
the
even billion
fuck?
would be good.
Yeah. But by that point in time, because
Yeah.
that was back when 2.5 billion was actually a lot of money.
Yeah, when gas
and-
was like $1.29 a gallon and $20 could buy you dinner for a week.
Yeah. So he says 2.5 trillion.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, what is that even? You can't. That's a number so big that you can't even wrap your head around it, man.
Mhm.
And
No, that's like
and-
telling me we've lost space continuum, and I'm like, okay, cool.
like, when did they just start throwing around $1 trillion? You know what I mean? Like this government spending bill is like, you know, one politician's like, it needs to be 10 trillion, and another one's like, oh, I'll only go for 5 trillion.
And then you notice
somebody else is like, but I'm not going to be happy unless it's 3.5 trillion. Like, what do you mean?
and
How
then
do
you
even
notice
start to do that math?
like I talked about with Todd Diart and James Sensenbrenner, that all of these spending bills, they sneak all kinds of little subtle, detailed things into there to hide little agenda pieces so that they can get stuff through without having to put whole bills out on their own.
Hey, for instance, this is kind of topical.
Yes.
With the 1.5 trillion infrastructure deal,
Yeah.
they have put in billions of dollars in starting a program for the mileage tax.
Yeah.
And that is the reason why it's topical, is because that is a form of surveillance. Like,
Yeah.
you're going to have a GPS in your car or whatever. And so now you not only pay for your car, you pay for its insurance, you pay for its tags, you pay for its gas, and pay for its maintenance. But now you're going to get to pay for the privilege of being able to drive to and from work.
Right.
Thank your government, boys. And now it's before anybody, you know, shits a brick that are listening to this and be like, are you kidding? Let's not pass that. Well, what it is it's the framework for doing it, and they're going to slow roll it, and they gave it funding for like the next 6 or 7 years in that bill. It's not being instituted into law per se, but they are to
Preparing
toy with
it.
the idea.
So that the
It's like-
next Republican president or organization can come in and just throw it out, so they could say, "Well, we tried."
Yeah. Yeah.
This
So
is like The Office, where Dwayne's the regional manager to the regional manager.
Right.
It's just continually. Yes, this is the. I lost where I was going.
That's
well,
okay.
they're just kicking the can down the road.
Yeah. Now, in regards to this, and it's good that you brought up infrastructure, because infrastructure plays a bit of a role here too, because if there's one thing that's true of being in public right now, it is that you cannot be in public without being on camera somewhere. You've got cameras in your traffic lights, cameras on your street lamps, cameras in your buildings, cameras in your offices. You've got cameras everywhere. Everybody has cameras, and to the point where everybody carries cameras around with them at all times, because everybody has a cell phone, and everybody's cell phone these days has a camera in it. So you don't think that that's a helpful thing for government? Well, the traffic cams are just to identify when people pull up to a light so that it'll trigger the light. Are they really? Then why are people getting speeding tickets with pictures of their car or running red light tickets with pictures of their car? So you're agreeing then that it's possible for the government to identify you through your vehicle through a camera. Okay, interesting. So now they can watch you without being on the streets. So now they can police you without being on the streets. All right. So what about the cameras outside? That's just to prevent, people from committing vandalism or to deter crime. Okay. So then how come they use footage from public cameras in court cases against people which are completely unrelated to their location? They use it just to check alibis or to confirm location status. So you're telling me that they have the ability to watch you wherever you go. We got to stop this conversation about the intended purpose and start talking about the conversation in the practical purpose, because I am so sick of people hearing, well, if you're not doing anything, then what does it matter if you're on camera? Because eventually they'll change what it's illegal to be doing. Eventually they'll find any reason to put you anywhere they need to put you so that they can do whatever they need to do to you. It's really rudimentary how simple this shit is when you stop looking at intentions, because I don't give a fuck what the government intends. I give a fuck what the government is capable of doing, because if they're capable of doing something, they will do it.
Snowden.
Yeah.
He said that when he divulged all the information, he said that if it was about terrorism, then he would have never done what he did.
Yeah.
He said that one of the first things he realized once he got security clearance was that this was never about terrorism. It was about economic and social control.
Yeah.
And that, when I think about that, I also put it into perspective today, because the Patriot Act has been thrown out. It's deemed unconstitutional.
Yeah.
So does that mean that the government learned their lesson and that they're not going to try and do something else?
They've only learned their lesson about doing it publicly.
Okay, and
now they'll just do it in private.
If you're on Twitter and you're trying to share a picture,
right,
it'll say, okay, see, I have to deactivate my account and start it back up every week.
Really?
And yeah, I don't know why, but my Twitter always locks up on me. Okay, so I have to do that every week. And every time I do, and I go to share a picture, it'll say, "Do you allow Twitter to access your photo, record audio, and all this shit?" Well, I don't agree to that. But I have to in order for the app to work. Just like when you get a new phone now, you don't get the option of if you want to use the internet or any of the functions of your phone.
Yeah.
If you want to call somebody, you have to agree to let your phone record audio. If you want to use the internet, you have to sign up through a Google account.
Mm-hmm.
And all those people that are like, well, I don't have anything to hide. And it's like, how do you know? Did you read the fucking Google terms and services? Because let me tell you something. I tried one time, and my brain is still melted from trying to fucking read all that legal jargon that they, that. Well, you're a client and they're a business suite, and that's the legal speak that they use in those terms and services. But not only do you not understand them, and they talk in riddles, but it is forever long. If I started it today and didn't take a second of sleep, I might be done 7 days from now reading that thing. And by that point in time, I don't know what I've read. I don't know what I'm agreeing to. And they do that on purpose.
Yep.
So we have become so preordained to just accepting that now if we download an app uh, from the Play Store or just
Yeah.
whatever,
People just give away
we
their
just
rights.
it's just allow because we're so used to it. And like so like what I'm trying to say is if you incorporate like the what we know today from what we've learned,
Yeah.
like the government used 9/11 as a way to fearmonger the public into compliance. Okay.
Yep. I
and
agree.
and finally that shit started to wear off a little bit after Snowden divulged everything, right? But not enough. Like,
No.
can you imagine how Ed Snowden felt when he sacrificed his career and his livelihood? He's now living in fucking Russia, where he used to love being here. He was in the army or
Hmm.
whatever, he joined the army because of 9/11, and now he's exiled to fucking Russia. And so like when he broke that story, trying to open up everybody's eyes, like uh did they disable their webcams? No, they just
Put
did more
tape
shit
over them.
on them. uh they don't even do that anymore, buddy.
I
and
know.
and they but what else did they do? Uh they welcomed Alexa into their homes.
Yep. And Google
Like,
Home
we
and
know, yeah, the Google Nest, the Ring, all this stuff is all recording you 24/7. And I mean, we know for a fact that Ring is the Ring security system
yeah.
is has been like given access the they've given access
To
to
federal
police
agencies.
and
Yeah.
federal agencies. We already know what Amazon and Google are capable of
Yeah.
as far as CIA contracts. What
And
do we
think
do?
about yeah.
Google Nest,
And,
Alexa,
and
and
think
all
about
for
what a
what?
ring
To be able to.
is. Think about what a Ring doorbell is. It's a camera that's constantly on, pointing right at somebody else's house.
But
You know,
not just at somebody else's house, but if you get the full package,
it's in yours too.
it's in your house. And we know that like LG and Samsung and Vizio, they all got in trouble for their smart TVs having cameras and microphones recording people. So
Yeah.
like like uh I mean, just think about this. Like they are selling you convenience at the sake of privacy. So
Right.
like what did I see the other day? I saw a commercial for a smart speaker in your shower. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like I'm sitting on the john taking a shit, and I'm looking at my phone, scrolling through the news, not even thinking for a second that there's a camera looking back at me, a
Yeah.
camera looking the opposite way. Now I don't take my phone in the shower with me. What are we gonna do? Oh my God, they might not be on fucking camera for a few minutes. What can we do?
Right.
Oh, smart speaker in the shower. Oh my God, yes. Fucking Alexa, like recording. We
Yeah.
all know it is recording every conversation that you have in your home. And what do? I mean, we welcome her in and say, "Oh my God, how convenient is it for me to be able to put my grocery list on there?
Yeah.
Alexa, add cottage cheese to my grocery list. Oh my God, what did I ever do before you?
Well, we
Like,
got
have
those
a fucking
fridges
pen
with
and
like the
paper?"
giant tablets too now. The fuck do I need a TV on my refrigerator for?
Oh, and yeah,
I'm just gonna sit here and eat snacks directly from the fridge.
Yeah.
But I don't want to miss my favorite Maddow segment.
While I'm
the
cooking, yeah.
the
Yeah.
workout mirror,
Yeah.
like oh my God, people don't have TVs in their at-home gyms. What are we gonna do? let's sell them a fucking mirror that they pay a monthly service on, to where they're just it's a magic mirror that are completely wired to us. So like,
All
I
I can
mean,
picture now is someone saying, "Mirror, mirror, who's the fattest bitch of them all?"
and somebody is on the other end looking at you saying, "You are, motherfucker."
Pay me.
And and, and like GPS. Like I remember when I got my first brand new car in like 2007. It was a Chevy Malibu, and
Nice.
and I'm driving that thing around, and I'm just like, man, all right, life is pretty fucking good. And all of a sudden, I start hearing a ringing. Like what the fuck is this? My car's ringing, and and I look up, and it's my mirror, uh, and it's ringing, and I hit the button, I hit it, and it says answer, and I hit it, and
Yeah.
it's like, Mr. Price, how are you doing? And I'm like, uh, o- okay. And they're like, hi, I'm Betty with OnStar, and I just wanted to let you know that you have a year's worth of free service with us because of the purchase of your new vehicle.
Right.
And I'm like, uh, okay. And she's like, so this way, if you're ever in a bad accident and your car has sensors in it, and if you're ever in a bad accident and can't call us, we will be alerted at OnStar, and we'll be able to send paramedics or call the authorities. And I'm like, in my mind thinking, Jesus Christ, I sometimes I get drunk. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and I drive,
I
and
don't really
I
want
don't
you.
condone that. I don't condone that to anybody listening, but back then I did it a lot. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, I could just see myself like fucking scraping a guardrail late at night,
Yeah.
and just being like, oh shit, trying to
The
straighten out. The
cops.
next thing I know, fucking cops are behind me, and they're
Yeah.
like, yeah, your car alerted us that you bumped
Hit a
into a
guardrail.
guardrail. What seems to be the trouble? And so I immediately said, I don't want your service. Betty, I don't want you calling my fucking mirror no more. All right.
What a sentence.
And she couldn't understand it, like what
Mhm.
uh, we're offering this great technology, but what I'm trying to say is, like, we as a society have like let the 9/11 incident, so like you opened with,
Yeah.
whether it was a false flag or not or whatever, what what it what happened afterwards is still uh having an effect on us even after the Patriot Act has been ruled unconstitutional. Like,
Yes.
uh, if uh, if you were against if you were against Big Brother spying on your neighbor back
Yeah.
then you were quite possibly a terrorist.
Yeah.
And is it any coincidence that a couple of years after the Patriot Act is ruled unconstitutional, that our government is using uh, January 6th and COVID protocol to fuel its next great surveillance experiment? You
Mhm.
know, they've look what they've done. They successfully scared up half the population on both fronts there. Once again, cheering on censorship, telling on your neighbor for having a fucking Trump flag or not wearing your mask, to
Having
you know,
people in your backyard.
and they back government control over free will. And some people, the same people that said that we had to vote out fascism not even a year ago, have willingly jumped headfirst into authoritarianism without even like realizing that they're doing it. I don't think. And
They think they're
you know,
doing it for the greater good because
yeah,
they're so propagandized.
But what's the
yeah,
greater good?
because once again, it's being masked under
Better
the guise of unity and patriotism, uh,
Yes.
and
safety.
and now they've included your public health, and like, oh my God, if your neighbor isn't wearing a fucking mask, then he's trying to kill your kid.
Right.
And so that that is the next thing to come about from this, man. The Patriot Act 2.0, the COVID passports, and I mean, just look how people are so divided on Twitter, man, and the government is loving it.
Right.
They're just like they're
Gi-
going to beg us to come back.
Give it a month before people start calling for arresting of unvaccinated people.
You know
Buddy,
what? I
that's
Give it
think
like
from
1
yeah,
month.
die.
I think
They
you're
want them to
absolutely right.
die.
Yeah, they do. I mean, we were talking just last week about how they're trying to make arguments about medical precedent and who deserves to get treated first.
Yeah, they're gonna straight up just be like, we should arrest them.
Yeah.
Same people that were saying Medicare for all are now saying Medicare for only those that I approve.
Medicare
Right.
for all and jail for the rest of them.
So
And
let's
that is feeding into the Patriot Act 2.0 frenzy. And
Right.
this time, instead of the government trying to sneak it under the rug, it, people are legitimately asking for it. Like
Yeah.
that's how trained and propagandized we are as a society.
More tyranny,
that
please.
more, please. I can't handle not paying a fucking mileage tax on my car, and I can't I can't handle going to the grocery store, and like if 85% of the fucking people are in there are masked and 15% aren't, then those people are fucking terrorists.
right.
I just can't take anyone serious that tells me about climate change and then takes a massive Boeing 747 with like 10 people.
Oh
So
my god.
yeah, let's look here at the overarching idea that we've been presenting for the last 15 to 20 minutes here, which is that think about your life, and that's the everyday parts of your life, the parts where you go to the store, you drive home, you go to work, you go to take your kids to wherever. Okay. In that time span, you pass 100 plus cameras, you interact with 100 plus people or more who have cameras on them. You go into a store completely cameronized, microphones in your pocket, in your car, phones in your technology, like in your mirrors and in your, your cars and your smartphones and your dashboards, microphones in your television, microphones in your remote controls, microphones in your game consoles, cameras on your game consoles, speakers with microphones in your shower, microphones in your bathroom, microphones in your children's rooms, if you have baby monitors, especially the modern ones, microphones in your kids' technology, microphones in your computer, microphones in your phone, cameras in your phone. Everything you do is potentially online at all times. Constant public information, cookies on every website, permissions on every app, every program requiring permissions, every program requiring legal consent. So at some point, it's not about protecting the rights of the company. At some point, it's about licensing your private life to private companies and to governments.
And almost all that shit you mentioned, Swerve, has came after 9/11.
You look at the rapid technological jump. In 2001, cell phones were like, it's this thing I have. Some people have them. Most people still use landlines. I got a phone in my car if I'm going somewhere. Like, it's not really a big deal.
Dude, I had one of those big Nokia ones that I had that was so big it wouldn't fit in my pocket. I had one of those clips that you had to carry it on the outside of your belt.
Now, 10 years later, and keep in mind, in technology terms, 10 years really isn't supposed to be that big of a jump. 10 years from Nokia brick phone to now, from Nokia brick phone to 2011, we had smartphones. They were the baby smartphones. They weren't quite what they are today, but they were smartphones. They had internet. They had social media, cameras, microphones, music, streaming to an extent. And then another 10 years to 2021, look at what we've got in our pockets today. I mean,
we've got like supercomputers.
We make the joke all the time that Bill Gates doesn't have to microchip you because Verizon got you to carry it around for him. But how far from that joke is the actual truth?
Oh, it's not a joke. It's true, though.
Everything you do is under watch. And a lot of people out there might still say, okay, well, that's private companies doing private company stuff. Who cares? How many times has the federal government tried to interfere with private companies to obtain data that is stored by private companies. It's like you said in the terms and conditions of a lot of these things. In Snapchat, there's a term and condition in there that if you are suspected of a crime, the police can ask for your stored Snapchat data and Snapchat will give it to them. So all that stuff about that being temporary, that's a lie. That's not temporary at all. On a lot of these apps, there are conditions in there. Hey, we can turn over any data at any time to the police, whether or not they have a warrant. On the language they put in there is on suspicion of a committed crime. Suspicion, not evidence. And when you are dealing in the realm of a suspected crime, all they have to do at any given time is to change what is considered a crime. And a lot of you out there are like, well, they'd have to go through Congress, and no, they don't. All they ever have to do is declare a state of emergency, and they get all sorts of extra special abilities because of the condition of a state of emergency. They get executive powers that they otherwise would not have. So there's an expression out there that people need to pay attention to, which is that if you give the government authority in time of an emergency to do something illegal, the government will create emergencies to continue to do illegal things. It's not crazy. It's real. And it happens all the time. And one of the loudest, most obvious examples of that was post 9/11 America. It allowed them to introduce the Patriot Act legally and publicly, which then let them do all sorts of things that are illegal, that violate the Fourth Amendment, that violate other parts of the Constitution in the name of fighting terrorism, which was an emergency. They will always create new emergencies to break the law if you give them that ability. Always.
Can I say something?
Yes, of course. It's our podcast. It's not my podcast.
Talking.
Well, a few days ago, when they had this January 6th appreciation rally or whatever that they were planning, okay, there was no online chatter about that. Now, if you would have asked me, some fucking schmo from Southern Illinois, on like the beginning of January, like, hey man, do you think they should have some extra security detail whenever Trump has his rally right by the Capitol? I'd have been like, fuck yeah, man. Like, people are going to Washington and people are pissed. That shit was online, okay?
Yeah.
You could find it anywhere. Facebook, Twitter, those are the two that I'm on. But you could find that chatter anywhere. And so they wanted to say like, well, we had no idea it was going to be like that. I had the idea. I'm a fucking nobody, man, and I could have told you that.
Right.
So, but then, so for this thing a few days ago, they're like, oh, it's going to be huge, you know, like they put up the barricades again and all that, and all these right wing people are, the only thing they're chattering about online is don't go. It's a setup. And then like the media got a hold of that and they were like, oh, the right wing conspiracy theorists are using a conspiracy theory to try and keep people from protesting at the Capitol. And so you can slowly see it start to come apart, their plan, right?
Right.
But something that nobody picked up on was that they put up that fencing, and at certain different checkpoints, they had put up these cameras that they had brought back from Afghanistan, and they were facial recognition. They were used in Afghanistan to try and find terrorists, right?
Right.
So, to my knowledge, that's the first time that our government had used that type of technology on our people to try and find domestic terrorists. So they were trying to lure these people out, okay? And whether they were trying to get them to incite a riot or whatever, that's up for debate, okay? But
Right.
they had all these cameras in place with the facial recognition just to get the people in the database. And nobody is talking about that.
Right.
You know what I mean? Now, of course, the media isn't talking about it because that thing blew up in their fucking face. Like, I think they said like less than 100 people attended it.
Right.
There was like 300 TV reporters and news people there, but there was like less than 100 protesters. And I'm sure you guys have seen the memes going around of all the feds that were set up.
Yep.
And yeah, and
Arresting other feds?
the what?
Arresting the
feds
other
arresting
feds.
other feds?
Yes,
The
exactly.
FBI arresting the FBI at the FBI.
Okay, so
meetup.
that was from the most recent one, right?
Yeah.
That was the Jan 6th.
Well, no, January 6th they didn't have that. That's the facial recognition stuff.
Right.
Okay.
But MSNBC, I was watching it, and they were showing them put the fencing up and all that, and they said, and they just threw it in there, like, oh, and they've also got those big poles with the balls on top of them. Those are facial recognition cameras that they brought over from Afghanistan after they came back, and they just threw it out there, like, no big deal. We're getting ready to use facial recognition shit on our own people, and that coincides with what you were saying with like the suspected of a crime.
Yeah.
Because once those people would have went, they would have been photographed, and then they would have been used to match up against other cameras and shit like that. But this time up against like mugshots and shit. So it would have just been borderline Minority Report shit. That's the way I look. God damn.
Yeah, I muted that so that nobody else could hear it, but that was that was a big sneeze there. Ugh. Anyway.
Yeah. But I wanted to throw that out there. I wanted to throw that out there because to my knowledge, that's the first time that our government has ever tried to use facial recognition technology on its own people. Now, I could be wrong there.
I'm sure it's used it before, like at some capacity, but maybe it wasn't as good as it is now, so who knows how effective it was. Now, I will say this in summary, because we're just about at the end here, I think. So I will say this in summary. There are people out there who will listen to this or other good, compelling discussions and research other good, compelling information and have the information in their lexicon about government surveillance and will still say, well, I'm okay with it for X reason, Y reason, Z reason. And that is okay if that is an informed opinion. You are allowed to have that opinion if it is informed. The main reason, like I said at the start, that I wanted to do this episode today was because I am not convinced that the majority of people have an informed opinion. I am not convinced that the majority of people understand the scope of this technology, or they don't care to understand the scope of the technology because its convenience is too enticing to them. People who love Alexa in their house because it's so convenient. People who love to listen to music in the shower and the speaker can get wet and they don't care. People who love OnStar because their grandmother was in a car accident and nobody helped them. Those conveniences are too enticing. And I understand that if that is an informed opinion. That being said, I think it is critical, if you are like us and you have that informed opinion that political and government overreach and oversight and surveillance is dangerous and illegal, then it is imperative that you not be afraid and that you speak up on it. because the common fear is, well, what if the government comes for me? Well, if that happens, I pity you and I'll help you get out. But it's really not that likely unless you do something like at the Snowden level or at the Martin Luther King level that you're going to be individually persecuted. What you have to worry about more is whether or not massive groups of people will be persecuted, because that's where the real threat comes from. You break up groups by arresting leaders and villainizing them publicly, because then their unification and their group brotherhood becomes a crime. That's what they try to do to groups like Antifa all the time. They try to villainize the Republicans try to villainize them as terrorist organizations, and then becoming a part of Antifa becomes like you're this horrible terrorist, right? So that's the big thing that you have to worry about, is using the government using that information to silence groups of people, and not just political groups, minority groups as well. We have, as I mentioned in this podcast, historical evidence of the defranchisement of political groups and minority groups for the benefit of the administration in charge. And that does go both ways. The fact of the matter is, government surveillance, unchecked, unbalanced, is a humongous problem, both practically and legally. And if you are not aware of it, you are doing yourself a disservice, and you're doing a disservice for everyone else who could use your help in these battles. So with that being said, I don't think I have too much more to add. I think we covered a lot of really good information. Did either of you have anything we didn't touch?
I think I do, actually.
Spittin'? Anything from you?
Oh, sorry. I turned my mic.
Turned your mic off.
Yeah. I was sitting there talking to you, and
Sorry about that, buddy.
No. I was just saying that I think I covered everything I wanted to.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad that you guys were able to hear. Now, if you guys want to listen to this before the FBI takes it down, you can do so in a number of places. We are all over the internet: iHeart, Amazon, Podbean, Google, Spotify, YouTube. Any one of those places is as good as any other as far as I'm concerned. We're just happy to have you listening. Keep your eyes on the channel. I'm hoping soon. I keep putting it off, but I am hoping soon that we will be able to start doing these live. It is a goal of mine very soon. Keep your eyes open as well, because we're going to be doing a mini pod with End the Damn Wars coming up tonight as well. So you might get a double release depending on whether or not I can get that edited tonight. So keep your eyes on that one, because that one should be a lot of fun. They've been doing a lot of stuff over the last couple of weeks, given the recent anniversary of 9/11 was only about 10 days ago. So very topical of us and them. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, Difficult Pod on Twitter at Difficult Pod. Again, you can find us all. I'm at Swerve City Elite. Spittin' is at Spittin' Venoms, and Yeti is at Yeti1181. So if you guys want to get with us, you can do that there as well. As always, please, if you like this, give it a like on whatever platform you're on. If you're on a subscription-based platform, give it a sub. We would appreciate that. Leave your comments below on wherever you're able to. Let us know what you think. And with that being said, we will see you next time on Difficult Realities. I'm Swerve. This is Spittin' and Yeti. Everybody have yourself a great night. And remember, turn your phone off when you want to talk about something important. We'll see you later.